Good morning, everyone. This is Randy coming to you from Snap Judgments. I am coming to you this morning with Peter Quinn, a fellow draft professor, podcaster, and a Seahawks fan. I thought it would be good to, kind of get behind enemy lines or him behind enemy lines and take a look at this game from each other's perspective. So we're going to talk about the Super Bowl matchup this coming weekend. And Peter, why don't you take a minute, introduce yourself, talk about where you podcast and kind of how you came into your NFL fandom and Seattle, figured out you're going to be a Seattle Seahawks fan.
Yeah, so as you can tell from the accent, I'm from Scotland. I'm a radio and sports journalist over here. I also do podcasts with the Draft Professors, the Mrs. Irrelevant podcast every Wednesday night, and I also write for Huddle UK, an NFL-based kind of outlet here. They have coverage for all 32 teams, and I'm the Seahawks writer for them as well. So I got into the NFL, just decided that after watching the Super Bowl for a few years that I wanted to actually get into it properly, follow a team. I happened, this was around 2017 or so, I think, and had some friends that I'd made in Seattle this summer before, and basically just decided that, going through the team names, on a list, and I was like, do you know what? Let's support the Seattle Seahawks, and yeah, ever since I've kind of followed it more and more closely. It's helped that over here that we now get the games on TV a lot of the time, which helps as opposed to having to follow through play by play on ESPN's app or whatever. So yeah, it's definitely made it a lot more accessible, and I've watched more and more. I'm now getting into the kind of college football side of things as well, and the scouting players, as you know, obviously with the draft professors. So yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but delighted to be here now with a chance to talk about the Super Bowl.
Now, have you been able to make it to any of the games that get played over in your direction?
So I've not been to any that have been played over here. I did go over to visit family in New Jersey just over a year ago, and I went to the Seahawks Jets game while I was over there, which was, I was about to say it was fantastic. It was hell for a long period of time. We kept, we think we fumbled 3 kickoffs or something silly like that. Gave up a return touchdown. It looked like we were going to lose to the Jets, who were struggling at the time. But then Leonard Williams got a length of the field pick 6 that turned it around, and it ended up being a really fun day. But I was worried for quite a while. Really cool experience though. Really enjoyed it, and looking forward to trying to get tickets if the Seahawks are ever over here, or even just to any NFL game. The London tickets, they go out very quickly. They disappear very quickly. But yeah, it's definitely on the bucket list to get down to a London game, maybe even a Munich game. So yeah,
Nice.
fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, win or lose or draw, it's draw is always disappointing, but win or lose, honestly, it's a good experience to have. Go see your team or any team, So, all right, well, let's get to the matchup here. Now, this is a Super Bowl rematch. Both fan bases very excited for different reasons. Seahawks trying to get revenge on a old wounds from an old Super Bowl they felt like they should have won, and Patriots are just kind of excited getting a kind of new dynasty to get started. So we've Sam Darnold trying to slay demons. Okay. Now my contention is that, people say the whole seeing ghost days are long past. And, that the quote was many years ago, but I think that the seeing ghost guy is still inside of Sam. And I think, this season he threw for the 3rd most interceptions in the league, only behind Geno Smith and Tua. That included a 4 interception meltdown in November. And, last season we saw him lay an egg in Minnesota, 18 of 41, 166 yards, 0 touchdowns. And this year, again, versus Minnesota, which you would think would be a revenge game, a high pressure situation, which is the sort of situation that I think Darnold kind of folds under. He went 14 of 26 for 128 yards and 0 touchdowns. Now, they won that game by a lot. I think it's 28-3 was the final score, but still not a great game for him. So, what do you think has changed about Darnold since he's gotten to the Seahawks, and what gives you, the idea that kind of we're beyond this Sam Darnold that melts down under pressure and kind of falls into? I don't know if you've seen the movie The Replacements. I always think about the quicksand quote by Keanu Reeves when I think about Sam Darnold.
That's fair. Yeah, I think one of the big things is that the whole building completely believe in him. I was mentioning this last night actually, that the defensive players have been asked in press conferences and stuff about Sam Darnold, and Ernest Jones was the clip went viral. Kind of swearing at a reporter like, "No, you're not going to have a go at Sam Darnold. This guy's our quarterback. We believe in him." I don't know what all the noise is about outside the building. We believe in this guy. Mike McDonald, every time he's been asked the question, I think there was one point pre-season where he was asked about, is Sam Darnold definitely going to be your starting quarterback? And he was like, yeah, is that even a question? I think that I agree. The four interception game against the Rams this year was not a fun watch, and it did kind of make me think, is this, as you say, are the ghosts going to come back out every time he plays against a kind of high level opponent and, kind of under the brightest lights? But it's worth remembering as well that even in that game, as terribly as he played for large portions of it, the Seahawks were a Jason Myers field goal away from winning that game because he'd driven down the field, kind of late on. And again, if you look at all the Seahawks defeats this season, they had the 49ers match where on the opening game where Rick Woolen, his head went, as we saw again in the NFC Championship game. But this similar thing happens in that opening week. Gave up a touchdown to Jake Tollinger out of nowhere that was just really, really poor. And then Darnold still had driven all the way down the field, and then Abe Lucas decided that it would be a good idea not to block Nick Bosa, and that was the end of the game. But otherwise, again, Darnold's mostly beating up on the bad teams. We've seen massive victories over the Saints, the Cardinals, the Commanders, putting 40 points on teams. The Vikings game was an interesting one. The defense kind of had us on top early. Ernest Jones had a pick six. And then from then on, Darnold kind of went into, I was going to say game management mode, but it wasn't even successful. It's not where he excels, I think. He kind of got a little bit tentative, and that's where he started to struggle. So I think it's a big belief thing. And at the moment, he's also got that belief. I'd be interested to see, I don't want it to happen, obviously. Say there's a turnover early in the Super Bowl, I'd be interested to see how he responds. Because, it wasn't just that the Seahawks managed to get to the Super Bowl despite Sam Darnold. That's a kind of narrative I've seen in the media sometimes, and I think that's a real disservice to him. Yes, he's thrown the interceptions. It's a lot of the time they've been in kind of dead games. Occasionally, it's been in the big matches, as I've mentioned. But I think that the NFC Championship game, he outplayed Matt Stafford. Sam Darnold was the reason the Seahawks won that game. Ken Walker didn't explode for 150 rushing yards. We didn't. The defense was not at its very best. Puka Nacua still ran wild over them for a while. So that game was won because Sam Darnold threw the ball extremely well and kind of did it when it mattered most. So yeah, I think that is a lot more level-headed these days, perhaps due to just that kind of depth of experience that he's got now. But yeah, I think that the guy who saw ghosts is still in there, but I think it takes a lot more for him to come out than it did previously, just due to that kind of extra experience and the trust that the rest of the organization clearly have in him.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's definitely some trust between him and Clint Kubiak as well. And I think what I think the kind of ending with Darnold is kind of that the more he thinks, the worse he is. I think the more he operates real quickly on schedule, within the system, etc., the better off he is. I think that the more he thinks, the more he gets in his head, the more he's his own worst enemy sometimes. And I think that kind of becomes the problem. But on the other side of the ball, we've got Mike Vrabel. He's trying to lay the foundation for a long-running dynasty. Right in his first year, I mean, Coach of the Year candidate. He's built a culture here that turned a team around that had gone 4-13 in consecutive seasons to a 17-win team headed to the Super Bowl, which is pretty wild. And this is going to be the first matchup of the league's top two defenses entering the Super Bowl since 2010. Seattle with 17 point, I have 17.1 written down, that has 17.2, but either way. And New England was 17.3 points per game allowed. Both these stats include the postseason. Do you think this is going to be a low scoring defensive battle?
I'm really not sure. So that's the kind of my automatic go-to is that two excellent defenses, and we're unsure about Sam Darnold. Perhaps Drake May, very talented, so he's still young. How will he handle the occasion? It would make sense for it to be a low-scoring game. But when the Seahawks have played kind of good teams this year, for the most part, they've been relatively high-scoring matches quite a bit of the time. Kind of had obviously the thriller against the Rams. When the Buccaneers were kind of in a bit of form, the Seahawks had a really high-scoring shootout with them. It wouldn't surprise me if Drake May can get it going early with, Diggs, but also the tight ends, I think, then that could be one that the Seahawks defense might need to. It may come down to who makes the big plays rather than a defense being strong throughout the entire match. It'll come down to which team got the big fourth down stop, which team managed to produce that turnover in a kind of relatively high scoring contest. Because I do think that both offenses are slightly underrated, perhaps because team, kind of we always look at the defenses immediately and go, this is a team carried by its defense. It's like both these offenses can play. Both of them, and they're quite well rounded as well. We've seen Travion Henderson for the Patriots really step it up a gear once he's been given the chance, because I know that he wasn't necessarily getting the amount of carries early in the season. I think that some Patriots fans were wanting, I believe. Also, you can speak more to that. But I think that he's, they've got a good ground game. They've got a good, a really good quarterback. The offensive line, it seems like it's been quite up and down, but that's a good offense. And it wouldn't surprise me if they caused the Seahawks some bother, particularly early on. I think the Seahawks have usually adjusted quite nicely in the second half of matches where they've been struggling.
Okay.
So I think it wouldn't surprise me if they need to do that at some stage.
Yeah, I mean, I know Seahawks tend to be a team that, they play 90% of their snaps in their nickel or dime defense. They basically dictate by personnel. And they say, listen, we're going to put out guys out there that are just good enough to do whatever we need them to do in this same formation. And they kind of try to dictate to the offense how the game is going to go in that way. Whereas the Patriots have been kind of a grinding, winning ugly games defense. And they've changed a lot throughout the year. Throughout the first portion of the year in the regular season, 38% pressure rate and blitzing just 28% of the time. In the playoffs, they've cranked that up a notch, blitzing 41% of the time and 52% pressure rate. And a lot of that's aligned with Milton Williams coming back, who's helped create a lot of quick pressures, which I'm going to pull up some stats on that in a moment. But he's helped create a lot of quick pressures up the middle. And so we kind of get into this, let's kind of go through the matchup piece by piece. We're talking about now the head coach matchup, where Mike Vrabel, because these are very different guys, right? They're both defensive head coaches, but Mike Vrabel being an ex-player, situational specialist, okay? He is very interesting and a very ballsy guy when it comes to situational football. Sometimes he makes calls that are just very surprising, and they tend to work out. He took, under a Tennessee team that shouldn't have been in the AFC Championship game to the AFC Championship game during his tenure there. And he's kind of known for building physical teams that win close games, building up culture, etc. He's also got the experience, the benefit of the experience of Josh McDaniels, who's going to be coaching in his 10th Super Bowl this time. Mike McDaniels on the other side, a career defensive coach. It feels to me like, and I know you said, everybody in the building's behind Darnold and all that. It feels to me like McDonald trusts his defense a lot more than his offense, though. And I think that's signified by the fact that he goes for it in fourth down situations at the lowest rate in the league, 0.4 fourth down conversions per game. That's less than half one per game, less than one every 2 games, is dead last in the NFL. So I feel like he's definitely a guy who trusts his defense more, and he comes from Baltimore. So that's, makes sense to me. Baltimore is very much a defensive driven franchise for a long, long time. So he's been able to build this defense that generates a lot of pressure without blitzing. And to the coaching front, this ties into what I was talking about earlier. I think Clint Kubiak is a key component in this game. And I think it's because, he's out there looking at a new job. I mean, win, lose, draw, it doesn't matter. Monday, he's moving to Vegas. And I think that he brought 2 coaches with him, quarterbacks coach Andrew Janocko, offensive line coach John Benton. I would expect they were with him in New Orleans. I would expect they're also moving on with him to Vegas. So there's 3 coaches there that are, look, you can say all you want. Hey, all we're doing is focusing on the game. And I'm not saying they don't want to win, and I'm not saying they're not preparing. But it's natural to know you're moving to a new city, you're moving to a new town. We know as draft nerds, if you will, that we're already kind of deep into the pre-draft evaluation season. So you've really got to start worrying about that as soon as humanly possible for your next stop. So I guess what I'm saying is, there are at least 3 coaches within that organization that are probably moving on after this game. Whereas I feel like the Patriots coaches, I don't know of anybody that's doing anything but preparing to win this game. So I feel like it's a slight edge on the coaching side, both due to the experience of Mike Vrabel and Josh McDaniels, but also due to the impending departure of Clint Kubiak and several of his key assistants. What do you think about the coaching matchup and how those things are going to impact this game potentially?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I love Mike Vrabel. I think, kind of a real culture-setting head coach. It's the players, at Tennessee, now at New England, seem to absolutely love him. And it's one thing that surprised me a little bit about Mike McDonald is that the players really seem to buy into his culture quite quickly, because that was what I was worried about. I knew that he had the kind of defensive mind for the X's and O's, and kind of drawing up different pressures, and kind of surprising teams with odd looks and coverage. However, I wasn't sure that he could manage to kind of inspire the room in the way that a Mike Vrabel absolutely does. He's done a good job of that so far, and I agree with you as well that I think the Kubiak attention, kind of throughout the whole process, but I think it was maybe quite clear that he was going to the Raiders. But it'll be interesting to see if that's had any impact. I mean, this is still, kind of a massive opportunity for him
Right.
to kind of sit. If again, people I think will give him perhaps even more of the credit than he's due if this offense plays really well in the Super Bowl, because people don't rate Sam Darnold. So I think that a lot of people will look at it like Kubiak managed to mastermind a good offensive performance against the second best defense in the kind of in the league in the Super Bowl with Sam Darnold as his quarterback, and that kind of narrative around it, if the Seahawks managed to pull something out of the hat here. But I think one name that you mentioned there was John Benton, and that'll be a big loss to Seattle if he leaves. The difference in Seattle's offensive line this year to any year that I've watched before has been wild. It's been I know they spent a first-round pick on Gray Zabel, and he's done a good job. A couple of rookie errors in there, as to be expected, but he's been really solid in there for the Seahawks. But the growth in Jalen Sundell at centre, he's managed to get the best out of this O-line. He gets them on the move, which is definitely their strength. Get the highlights, cut-ups online of all 22 footage, for example, with Sundell, Zabel, and Charles Cross blocking 20 yards downfield on a screenplay, and they're absolutely flying. So that sort of thing. I think Benton's had a big impact. He could be a big loss if he goes with Kubiak. But in terms of this game, I suspect that Vrabel might kind of provide a bit of an edge. Just as you mentioned, the situational football type stuff. He's got more experience of doing that in big matches than McDonald. McDonald's done well so far in his big matches. I've not got too many complaints in terms of his clock management, in terms of even decisions to go for it or not. He's mostly been pretty good in his 2 years in Seattle. But Vrabel's got such a wealth of experience. The stage is not going to be too
very
big for him.
Conservative, though, right?
Yes, yeah, of course. And I think that. Yeah, I still think that Vrabel's just got that, just the mentality, I suppose. I think it's one of those things that I want to make sure that McDonald will have his players ready to run through a brick wall. I know that Vrabel already will, because that's just it's this sort of guy he is. He could, he could fire me up to run out there and try and tackle Derrick Henry. The guy when the guy talks, you go, yep, that's I'd like that to be my coach. So yeah, I think definitely the Patriots have a slight edge there. I think it's one that maybe it would take a watch back for me to work out what McDonald. If it goes well for the Seahawks, I'd maybe need to watch it back to work out some of the kind of finer things that McDonald did in terms of the defensive scheme that maybe made a difference for the Seahawks. Whereas I think that in terms of just in the moment coaching during the match. I think that Vrabel perhaps has a slight edge there.
Yeah, I mean, schematically, it's really kind of McDonald against McDaniels more than Vrabel, because Vrabel's really the culture setter and the in the moment game caller. Which kind of that whole thing goes to my next question for you. There's been a lot of talk about the easy path, even historically easy, some people have said, that the Patriots have had through the playoffs. And I do feel like there's not enough talk on the other side. And I wonder what you think. I'm going to put the graphic up here on the screen right here. Now, the teams that the Seahawks have gone through in the playoffs, both mid-rated, average. I'm not saying they're bad. 10th and 13th is solid, but they're not top 5 defenses. And they also are two teams that the Seahawks played twice during the year, both of them. Whereas the Patriots' path through the defensively through the playoffs has been much more challenging in terms of the defenses that they've faced. And they've also faced different teams. They've had to really morph their offense and their defense to face different scenarios, Additionally, I mean, the defense has done it essentially without the offense. In New England, with Drake May has been, look, he's a Southern kid. He's got small hands. He's clearly not good in the snow right now. He clearly needs some practice at that. You got to hold on to the damn football at least. It's a little ridiculous. I'm worried about it, but I'm not worried about it right now because there is 0 snow in the forecast for San Francisco. Very much not concerned about the Drake May fumbleitis that he developed in the playoffs. Being turnover prone, that sort of thing. So what do you think about, the challenge for Seattle in facing their first real top tier defense and facing a playoff opponent that they're seeing for the first time this year?
So in terms of the top defense, I think you're right. That's going to be an interesting one. I've not been able to work out the Rams defense because whenever the Seahawks play against them, whenever I see them play, other than that, the defensive line is scary. They've got the young guys, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Jared Verse. even ex-Seahawks guy Puna Ford is playing really nicely these days. But at the same time, their secondary is really, really poor. And I think that's where
itty bitty
that,
little guys.
yeah, they've really struggled. Not just with containing JSN, but the whole, kind of even in the run game, I think the Seahawks have mostly played quite nicely against them. It's a tough one because I don't think that the matchups, it hasn't felt like it's been an easy run for the Seahawks. I think that getting the 49ers when they did was a really a good matchup for the Seahawks, because I'm impressed and surprised that San Francisco made the playoffs. They narrowly beat the Seahawks in the opening game of the season, as we mentioned, but that was due to some really poor errors from Seattle more than anything else. And that was them with Nick Bosa, with George Kittle, with Fred Warner. And now without them, I think it was odd to go into a playoff game thinking that this team shouldn't cause the Seahawks too many problems unless we lose the game ourselves. I would agree that one was certainly an easy one comparatively an easy one for Seattle. And then the Rams, I think, are they're still a deceptively good defense. I think is it Shula, their defensive coordinator, has done a really nice job of doing things that Darnold didn't expect in their regular season matchups. I don't know if he maybe ran out of things, or if just kind of the Seahawks managed to adjust nicely in the NFC Championship game. But that was a surprisingly good performance by the Seattle offense and poor by the Rams defense, I thought. For the Patriots, I agree. The kind of all this talk of it being an easy run to the Super Bowl, I'm not there with it. I think that when you go up against defenses of that caliber, the Chargers are a nice defense, but they're not bad. But going up against the Texans and then the Broncos, that's a gauntlet. That's those are as good defenses as you're going to play in the NFL. The less said about their offenses in those matches, the better. But I think certainly from a defensive standpoint, that the Patriots had to grind it. It was always going to be a case of grinding out those victories because of the style of play of all of the teams involved. But that's not an easy path to the Super Bowl. The 49ers game is a far better matchup for the Seahawks to get than any of those matches for the Patriots. They've had to grind their way there. It's been real, kind of tough, hard-nosed football by all accounts to get them this far. But again, I think that it shows that they'll be prepared for that style of game potentially, and it'll take something special from the Seattle offense, who I do think are a better offense than kind of the Patriots have come up against so far in the playoffs. But yeah, it'll take something special to kind of manage to make this pattern of the game flow differently than the Patriots' previous ones.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree. All right, let's talk more specifically about some specific matchups and that sort of thing here. Now, when the Patriots offense is on the field and Seattle's defense is on the field, a couple things that I'm keying in on. Number one, Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy is a key to stuffing the run game. Seattle stuffs the run for loss or no gain 21.6% of the time when Murphy is on the field, and 14.5% when he is off the field. That's a 7.1% difference just from one guy. And Murphy's a different kind of nose tackle, right? Because he's a little smaller, he's a little lighter, he's a little quicker, and he lines up differently. Over 50% of his snaps in the 2 or 2-eye spot, which isolates that left guard. More often the left guard than he's not going the other way, which has been a weak point for our offensive line, Jared Wilson. My end kind of result on that is kind of the pin and pull concepts, where you're kind of popping to the outside and hoping to pop off for a big gain. Now, as you see on the screen there, Travion Henderson led the NFL, 4 rushing touchdowns at 50-plus yards in 2025. No other player had more than 2, and only 2 players in the history going back to 1963 have had more than 4. So, hey, listen, that's quite the list to join. But if he does join that list, that's the way that this run game is going to get going. I think. I don't think it's going to be behind the tackles. I also think that Drake May is a key to that. Mobile quarterbacks, I think, keep that defense, which kind of tends to be a little overly aggressive, keep them honest. What do you think about in terms of the run game when the Patriots offense is on the field and Seattle's trying to defend that?
So I had Drake May scrambling as my kind of key to the. I mean, even kind of designed run plays as well. Getting him on the move, I think, will open up an awful lot of options for them. Particularly, one worry that I now have for the Seattle defense, Nicky Manwari left practice with an injury yesterday. So kind of no word yet on how severe that is. But if he's not good to go, he's exactly the sort of guy that the Seahawks would maybe have hanging around to try to keep May in the pocket, kind of on the lookout as a bit of a QB spy at times, despite him, officially being listed as a safety. So that's one that would definitely make a bit of a difference, because while I think Ernest Jones and Drake Thomas, the Seahawks linebackers, have been excellent this year, they've not faced too many really mobile quarterbacks. Kyler Murray obviously not being around means that the Seahawks, Jacoby Brissett is a different type of mobile threat, I suppose. But if you look through their schedule throughout the whole season, Cam Ward is probably about as mobile as they've come up against. Jaden Daniels
and arguably played
injured.
the best against them, right?
Oh yeah. That was one of those games for me that I was like, oh, I've not paid much attention to the Titans this season, but this guy can really play. Also I knew him kind of from looking at the draft before it took place, but I hadn't really kept up with how he was doing in Tennessee that closely. But getting to see him, he was excellent that day. Had a really, really good game, and also exposed some holes, I think, in the Seattle defense. I think that the interesting thing as well with kind of getting May out of the pocket. I know we're talking about the run game, but if he can manage to make a few of those hero plays, so that's what Ward was playing hero ball, for most of that game, roundabout scrambling everywhere and then throwing off the back foot type thing. Brock Purdy actually caused the Seahawks some problems doing something similar, despite it not really being his game. I would say if May can manage to get a couple of off-schedule really good throws, get the Seahawks on the back foot, I think that's another thing that could help manage to flip kind of the impression of this game and the momentum of it as well. Because the one thing you mentioned there in terms of the run game, if you get 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2 against the Seahawks, if you're just you're not going to win, have much success running it up the middle. When they've got Uchenna Nwosu, DeMarcus Lawrence, Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams in there, those guys all season long have been put in situations, maybe I don't know, from 2nd and 3, they're forcing 4 and outs and turnovers and downs. So it's one thing that will be interesting to watch. I think that trying to get to the outside is definitely a worthwhile tactic, because whether it's Josh Jobe or Reek Woolen who are playing opposite Devon Witherspoon, tackling is a bit up and down there. So again, the Seahawks, I wouldn't have personally done it, but when Kobe Bryant got back fit again, they brought him straight back in over Ty Akada. Akada's a much better open field tackler. Bryant probably better in coverage, but I think that is a weakness for the Seahawks. If you get kind of on the outside, round the outside of their defensive line, then there can be some real open field there for you to exploit. And we've seen it on occasion this season. I can't think of the exact players, but there's been a couple of times the Seahawks have given up really big chunk plays in the run game, but they're very rare. You just need to kind of, I suppose, hope that one of them happens in the Super Bowl, because that's again the sort of thing that it puts, also it puts a defense on the back foot as soon as if you give up a big play. So I think that getting outside the tackles is definitely a valuable kind of tactic for the Patriots. I think that also getting Drake May on the move in the pass and run game will be valuable for them as well, because that would be something that the Seahawks will struggle to match up with.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me too. Now going to the passing game, look, Leonard Williams is a nightmare. He is a real problem to deal with. The Seattle pressure profile is different than a lot of teams, though, because they rarely blitz. Yet they have the fourth highest pressure rate in the NFL. That's primarily using just 4 rushers, and that's because they also have the fourth highest stunt rate in the NFL. They have 20 and a half sacks on stunts on third down alone. That's the second most in the NFL behind Houston. Now, with versus without stunts, very different results. 4-man rush with a stunt, 9th in pressure rate. The 4-man rush without a stunt is 19th in pressure rate. And it seems to me that Leonard Williams has been the primary stunt initiator on that team. When he's stunting, he is a 19% pressure rate. It dropped off to 7% in the NFC Championship, however. And I think that's because the Rams really identified the tell in that in terms of where Leonard Williams is lined up. And if he's lined up at the 4-eye or wider, you're going to get a stunt, probably a tight end stunt, trying to isolate that guard and bring the other guy, the defensive end, in around. Yet if he's 3-tech or tighter, probably no stunt. So I'm wondering if you think that that is, in fact, an indicator of, what's going to come pre-snap. And if you think that that's something that they're going to try and change up, or do you think that they're just going to kind of continue running with, we do what we do and you be good enough to beat us at it?
I think that there will be an element of, trust in what's got them here. As you say, Williams, if he can manage to, particularly through stunts, but even when he doesn't, he still can manage to find a weak shoulder. Then he's gone. He's kind of getting pretty quick pressure as well as the key there. And I think that the kind of him lining up out wide, you are quite likely to get that stunt as well, as you say. It doesn't tend to bend around the edge too often. In terms of his pass rush moves. So I think that he's one that you kind of always have to be aware of, because the Seahawks as well sometimes will line up DeMarcus Lawrence in, kind of inside as well. It gives him a bit of flexibility. You've got Uchenna Nwosu has got some kind of flexibility there as well in terms of where he can line up. And I think one underrated aspect of the Seahawks in terms of getting pressure consistently as well is the depth that they've got on the defensive line. You're not asking Lawrence and Nwosu, who are both around 30 or above, to play 50 snaps a game. Like, you've got Boy Maffey and Derek Hall there, who the production's not been there this season, but they've put pressure on the quarterback, and it's kind of been allowed other guys to sweep up. I think they've got 2 sacks apiece this year, which is not great for second round edge rush picks.
Right.
But at the same time, you can certainly, with Hall in particular, you notice when he's on the field. He's marching his tackle back into the quarterback, and that allows somebody else to maybe sweep up if they go off script. So being able to rotate like that, and then obviously, you've got Williams and Murphy in the middle, but you've also got Jaron Reed there as well, like really savvy veteran defensive lineman who comes in and getting to use those guys for fewer snaps in a game. I think that impact that it has to keep them fresh, particularly as a couple of them are older guys as well, means that they are much more effective when they're on the field. It means that every down for these guys matters, rather than kind of the defensive lineman maybe getting a bit tired, taking a few down, a few snaps off effectively. You've got a rotation there of guys who want to play more, and that's kind of creating a more consistent pass rush for the most part for the Seahawks. So I'm interested to see how they do here, because the pass rush is not a good matchup with the Rams. That pass rush was just not there. Any of the 3 matchups, I think Matt Stafford's barely taken a sack against the Seahawks in the last couple of years. So I think that it'll be interesting to see how the matchup goes with the Patriots offensive line. I know you've got a couple of young guys in there as well who are talented players, to be fair, but it's obviously going to be a tough challenge up against that Seahawks D-line.
Yeah. I mean, their communication, they've struggled dealing with stunts and loops and stuff like that all year. Will Campbell at left tackle and Jared Wilson at left guard. The one thing I will say is, I'm putting the stat up there right now, they are one of the most consistent lines in the NFL. It's all of them at least 780 snaps this season. Mike Onwenu has really turned into one of the more dominant guards in the league again, turned back into that now that he's really settled into his right guard position. And, I think that's that right side of the offensive line, very stable, very reliable, not worrisome. The left side of the offensive line, I'm a little bit concerned about, but at least we kind of know where things are coming from, I guess. Now, in terms of when the ball gets actually in the air, when Drake May is throwing it, um, Seattle plays a lot of cover two. Eman Worry is a key cog in that defense. That's my ears really perked up there when you were talking about that, because that is a key injury. That's a real that would be a real problem for that defense. You cannot replace that guy, and he's physical enough to take on the run. He's athletic enough to make plays on the ball. He's one of the best man defenders in the NFL, and this in his rookie season, he is really what enables a lot of their versatility out of playing in one alignment. So I think that would be a huge problem. I also think you mentioned Kobe Bryant earlier. I think he can be a little bit of an issue or a little bit of a weak link in that otherwise very strong secondary. And you had mentioned the guys with the 2 sacks each too. I think it's worth mentioning. Look, a lot of trench play does not show up on the stat sheet, but you're still getting valuable snaps out of these guys. And so, you're not going to have eye-popping numbers all the time, but you are going to have impactful plays and impactful players up and down the roster of any championship level team. So I think that, again, like I said, Kobe Bryant is someone that I would target. I also think that another key to this game for me is Kyle Williams. He's our rookie receiver, 3rd rounder, fast guy. You remember last year's draft cycle out of Washington State. He ran a 4.4 at the combine. Now, I think it would be key to get him, if you can, in a one-on-one situation against your second cornerback, Josh Jobe, who a few years back ran a 4.57 40 at the combine. The deep ball game is really about who gets to that spot first. And, smart money goes on the guy who ran the 4.4 40. So, those are my keys to the game from a Patriots standpoint. I guess, what would be your take when the Patriots actually get the ball off Drake May's hand and it's in the air? Where should it be going? Et cetera. What are the keys to that aspect of the game from your perspective?
Yeah, I definitely think if you watch some of Jobe's matchups, like even against Puka Nacua, who's not the world's fastest receiver, but he can. Jobe's a guy who often ends up trailing by a few yards in coverage. Despite not having elite speed, he seems to manage to make it up quite nicely, and he times his hands pretty well at the catch point. But there's sometimes that if the ball's kind of on target. And if, say someone like Kyle Williams, who's also got that speed, that Jobe can't make it back to catch up in that situation, then I think that Jobe could be in trouble. Particularly, I think Kyle Williams as well. One of the things that was noticeable about him in that draft cycle was how sharp he is off the line. Great release to kind of wrong foot the cornerback. And I think that that's something that Jobe and Devon Witherspoon are quite susceptible to if they don't manage to get their hands kind of on the receiver in press coverage, because Witherspoon's been beaten pretty badly a couple of times. He had a really poor game for the most part against the Rams in the NFC Championship game, but then managed to make a big play on 4th down. So I think that's the thing. There's definitely plenty of plays to be made against all 3 of Seattle's main cornerbacks. Rick Woolen is one that he's probably their best shutdown corner on a snap-to-snap basis, but he struggles in the biggest moments sometimes, whereas the other 2, I think, are the opposite. On a snap-to-snap basis, Witherspoon doesn't get targeted very often, but he can give up plays. Obviously, he's a smaller corner as well, very light for the position. So I think that he can. There's a couple times this season he's just been beaten on playing jump balls, just because the other guy's bigger than he is. And Jobe, as you mentioned, when the receiver's faster than him, he can struggle as well. Both of them tend to pick up when it matters most and make some big plays. Woolen tends to be the other way around. On a snap basis, he's pretty good, but there's always the risk that he gives up a 40-yard reception because he's not paying attention. So like it's an interesting dynamic to have, certainly. And I think, again, for me, one of the keys, I think, will be the Seahawks tackling. Whether it's after the catch, whether it's in the run game, I think in general the Seahawks open field tackling at times has been excellent this year, and that's what I think got them a couple of victories in the later half of the season when they weren't playing quite as well. Was that there was very few yards after contact, so that's something that they have to manage to get back to and cut down on, because otherwise the Patriots have the talent to hurt them across the board.
Yeah. And just going back to what you had mentioned earlier about Trayvon Henderson getting on the field, I think the pass protection has been awful for him, and that's why he's not getting on the field. If you see this graphic I just put up here, Trayvon Henderson has allowed 25.8% pressure rate, which is third highest among running backs, while Ramondre Stevenson has allowed 3.6% pressure rate, third lowest. And that's just kind of been the book on Henderson all year long, which is really weird because, again, as a draft guy, the book on him coming into the draft was not only is he good at pass protection, he's ready to step into the NFL right now. He's the best in this class at pass protection, and so on and so forth. And boy, has that not worked out well for us. So getting on, like, let's get to the other side of the ball, where when Seattle is on offense, and from my perspective, the entire offense is built around manufacturing JSN one-on-ones. They want man coverage specifically for JSN because he's great against man coverage, but the rest of the team, maybe not so much. Efficiency wise, their EPA per drop back versus zone is plus 0.03, while their EPA per drop back versus man is almost 6 times higher than that, plus 0.17. And let's see, they're just less play action than league average. I think especially with Zach Charbonnet being out, we're probably going to see a lot less of that sort of thing. So lots of a traditional drop back, quick 5-step drops, trying to get the ball out quickly in those one-on-one situations to JSN. I think my thought is that quick pressures up the middle from specifically Milton Williams and Christian Barmore, who these guys are just really good at getting the quarterback really fast. And a quick pressure, just for everybody who's listening, is categorized as getting a pressure to the quarterback in less than 2.5 seconds. So he's barely even having time to complete that 5-step drop, and let alone get the ball out. So I think that's a key to the game, is you get that quick pressure. And like you had mentioned earlier, from my position, you get that quick pressure early in the game, you force an early turnover, and you just hope to watch this guy, go down the quicksand of the game after that. What do you think, from your position on that, what is your thoughts on that game plan, I guess?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of that, particularly kind of the point at the end there. Like, so seeing Anthony Bradford being tied third most among right guards in terms of the quick pressures allowed, that's unsurprising because he's a better player than he gets credit for, because for the most part he's fine. But when he gets beaten, it's, he doesn't get a hand on the guy. Like, turns around, facing the wrong way, does not know, kind of, it's not even sometimes on stunts. It's literally just, speed off the snap, or maybe not understanding the assignment fully. So I think one of the main things for the Seahawks, there's going to be a few plays where one of the Patriots interior D linemen bursts past Bradford in the blink of an eye. The Seahawks need to make sure that doesn't immediately lead to a turnover. I think limiting disaster on the plays where you basically get a free rusher at Darnold is going to be a massive decider in how this game goes. Because if that's leading to turnovers each time, that's leading to big sacks that kill your drive, then that could be something that makes a difference. Because If it, I fully expect it to be a close game, and you can't afford to be giving up points, killing drives, turning the ball over, as we know. So I think that'll be one key. I agree that a lot of the time, the first half of this season, it felt like teams were like almost daring the Seahawks to try and chuck it towards the JSN. Leaving. I think one of the ones was the Falcons with Terrell. They kind of we trust our cornerback. We're going to put him in a one-on-one situation with JSN, and there's only one result there really at this point. I think towards the back end of the season, teams did start to scheme more towards making sure that someone's getting, however good your cornerback is, they're getting some help against JSN, and mixing it up so that you're getting some zone coverage in there as well to try and to effectively give some help there. One thing that I like for the Seahawks is that they started using JSN as an option out the backfield here and there. It's, if there's a game where he's getting blanketed by a cornerback for a period of time, they try to switch it up and get him, because obviously he is a versatile player, so they can move him about, create different looks for him to get him in space, at least give him a few yards head start, I suppose, to try and get himself a yard of space to get him hands on the ball. I think another thing in terms of the man coverage that will be interesting, if teams lean too far towards JSN, you do have Rashid Shaheed's speed there as a deep ball threat. We saw that early in the NFC Championship game. That was the first time this season that Shaheed's had a kind of a proper go route, just send him and chuck it over the top of the defense. They've not managed to connect on that since the trade. He's done everything else really, really well. We've seen how important his return work has been for the Seahawks and special teams, and also in the run game is a real good jet sweep option as well. But we hadn't actually seen that kind of proper deep ball downfield, so we hadn't connected with Darnold on that too many times. So that's one that the Seahawks will look to, I think, if he's fully fit and firing as he appears to be. And I think as well, you've got Cooper Kupp for third down, seems to get himself half a yard. I don't know what it is. His movement skills are not excellent now, but it'll be interesting to see, obviously, potentially, if he's going up against a Christian Gonzalez or somebody in that spot. Obviously, very, very good cover corner, so he might struggle a bit more in that scenario. But that's been a bit of a safety blanket in important moments for the Seahawks recently. Is going to Kupp there. Kind of in the important moments, he seems to manage to find himself an extra yard, because he's struggled to separate from man coverage now compared to years previously. He's certainly not the same receiver that he was, and that's understandable. But
listen, I can attest to the fact that as you get older, you lose a little bit of explosiveness.
Yeah, to be fair, I'm getting there as well.
Bit of that quickness, okay.
Yeah. So, but between that, I think it'll be interesting as well. AJ Barner's been on the injury report the last kind of few weeks, so I think he will play, I'm sure, and he's just kind of playing through a bit of a niggle, but it seems to have slowed him down a little touch. He's been really good, both him and Eric Saubert in the blocking in the run game. But I think it'll be key for the Seahawks to try to get Barner a couple of the explosive plays that they've managed with him when it's mattered most again this season. Like towards the second half of the year, they've had some a really big one in the game against the Rams, the comeback victory in the regular season, and there's been quite a few times as well that he's just off the play action game as well. He's been really effective getting downfield, getting himself open. So that will be another important factor for the Seahawks.
Yeah, well, I noticed you kind of touched on real quick one thing that I had highlighted in my notes here, so I took a quick picture of it so I could put it up there for everyone else. Oh, I noticed that in interceptions on the second half of the season got cut off just because of the layout on my document here, but the interceptions would be 3 at the bottom of that. Weeks 1 through 10 with the Seahawks offense, they faced coverage of man coverage at the 10th lowest rate. And you can see the numbers there: 9.5 yards per attempt, 117.5 rating, 23.8% explosives. And that's one of the key numbers right there. 10-3 touchdown interceptions. And then if you go weeks 11 through 18, they actually faced man coverage even less. And what teams started doing with match zone principles, some tight, aggressive zones, kind of bracketing JSN, and that seemed to work, and it really that was kind of the Rams blueprint. I believe that's from the first Rams game on. And that's kind of the Rams blueprint of dealing with them, is kind of man with zone rules, safety help lurking, tight, aggressive zones. And that's worked out well. And I'm wondering how the Patriots want to attack these guys. Do they want to say, Christian Gonzalez, you're up for an extension? Get out there one-on-one with JSN and earn that contract? Or do they want to go to the other side of that, to kind of an old Belichick method of doubling the top receiver and then putting your lockdown corner on the second receiver? So they would, have Carlton Davis with maybe Hawkins or Woodson over the top helping. Well, Gonzalez completely took Kupp out of the game and was perhaps also able to help with whoever is dealing with Shaheed or Barner.
I mean,
Barner.
yeah, Barner.
And I did also want to throw a little fun fact nugget, whatever, in there for you when you're talking about Shaheed. I heard somewhere this week, for the past 5 Super Bowls, someone who was acquired in season has scored a touchdown. So that would seem to favor Shaheed, although we do have some like third string running backs we've acquired here or there. But just saying, it's a fun little nugget from a Seattle aspect, I would think. And do you think that shift at the second half of the season is really about that schematic play? And how do you think that they're best to address JSN? Telling Gonzalez, get out there and earn that contract? Or do you think by doubling him? Or do you think a mix of all these things throughout the game is the best approach?
I think a mix is definitely the way to go. I agree completely. From that Rams game, you could see a switch in the way that defenses were playing against the Seahawks. Because even I feel like it was most evident in that Vikings game that we mentioned earlier. I think the Colts did a very good job of it this season, of that, just effectively using mostly zone and smothering the Seahawks. But as you say, kind of bracketing JSN and saying, okay, beat us elsewhere. And the Seahawks at times have struggled to do that, because I think the loss of Torrey Horton also hurt them, because he was thriving on kind of limited touches as a potential kind of wide receiver 3 role, maybe.
He's thriving on my daily fantasy teams too.
Exactly. Yeah, just a touchdown machine. I think he had 13 receptions, 5 touchdowns, maybe something silly like that.
I felt like I knew a secret because I was like a draft guy, and he was very popular in draft communities last year. And it was like I felt like I knew a secret. And yeah, it killed me when he went down. Him and the guy from Denver, Franklin.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, didn't mean to.
Absolutely. I think that. It's been tough the second half of the season for them to work out ways to make the offense work when JSN's not being at his best. And I think that as a result of it as well, like that JSN's been the kind of the leading receiver in almost every game for the Seahawks this season. Like, I think he had one regular season game that was maybe AJ Barner, if memory serves, and that's not going to be sustainable, because in a game like this, I do think that Gonzalez will be a big part of how the Patriots want to try and take JSN out of the game, because I mean, as we know, Carlton Davis is a kind of talented corner. Like make no bones about it. This isn't just Gonzalez he's the only corner and he's going to match up with our only receiver. I think that they're going to try to move Gonzalez about potentially the same way that the Seahawks are going to try to do with JSN, and try to come up with a few different methods of trying to stop JSN, because I think the key for the Seahawks this season has been that people have been, everyone knows that if you shut down JSN, that's going to be a massive help for your defense to try to hold Seattle out. So everyone's been trying different things and they've managed to adjust. I fully expect them to do the same in the Super Bowl. So I think there will be multiple different schematic looks, different players covering him, different levels of support being offered to anybody who's left in one-on-one coverage, which will mean that he should. I think that the Patriots will have multiple things lined up to try to deal with him over the course of the game, and it'll end up being a bit of a cat and mouse style affair. I think, in terms of trying to keep him bracketed at all times.
Yeah, I wonder, from someone who watches these guys every game, because I do not. I mean, I don't watch the Seahawks every game. I've seen a few of them, but I wonder how JSN deals with physicality, in your opinion, because part of the reason that I think that a double team situation is the best way to deal with him is for a couple of reasons. I think Carlton Davis is extremely physical man press coverage corner who likes to kind of get physical with guys right off the line. And if you're able to bring in safety help, Darnold's got to go past his first read, which is going to take him into 2.5, 3 seconds. And, you create the pressure that way. But JSN, the book on JSN coming into the draft, and a lot of times, again, as a draft guy, when they're on other teams, what I really know of the guy is what I knew in the draft process. And the book on him was kind of always, does he have the physicality to play on the boundary? This is the first year they're really testing that out. With about 80% of his snaps coming on the boundary this year, as opposed to the prior seasons where it was about kind of completely flipped, about 80% of his snaps coming in the slot. How do you feel in this first year of him playing on the boundary and testing all those theories? How do you feel he's dealt with the physicality when he's faced it? And can you think of any specific matchup where a cornerback really tried to get rough with him and knock him off his game in that manner?
Yeah, so I think it surprised me how well he's dealt with playing outside for the majority of snaps this year. I think that, I remember his rookie season where we had Shane Waldron as offensive coordinator, and he was used effectively as a gadget guy. He was barely targeted more than 2 yards downfield, which now seems like a crime against football. But yeah, he's grown more and more as a receiver. I think he's quite well rounded now. I agree that physicality is probably, kind of increasing the level of physicality is something that would be a good plan, because he's not faced too many guys who are really physical. He gets into he gets into battles here and there throughout the match. He's a willing blocker, considering that he's not the biggest guy in the run game. He can make some real key blocks for the Seahawks, and they value that between him and Cooper Kupp. But I wanted to say Diomedor Lenoir as somebody who's got quite physical with him, and he has, but it's always after the play. Like Lenoir, it's a funny one. He's talks a lot before these matchups, and I think the last time he wasn't even covering JSN for the majority of. They had the rookie Upton Stout doing that instead. So yeah, I think that he's somebody who it's worth trying to get physical with at the line to throw him off. He's that elusive at the line; it can be quite tough. So you don't want to overcommit. That's one thing you have to be wary of, definitely, because then he can punish you. If I think it was against the Commanders. I'm trying to remember who it was. One of the Commanders' corners had a really rough rep. I think he maybe got injured as a result of it, because he was kind of overcommitting at the line of scrimmage, wanting to get physical and try to affect JSN's timing at the line of scrimmage, and was wrong-footed very, very badly. It led to a big gain. So yeah, I think it's important not to overcommit against them, because again, as a fairly small receiver, is somebody that teams will often look to, think, all right, we can maybe bully this guy a little bit, kind of even as an intimidation thing, aside from just disrupting him. And it's not proved effective so far, and certainly in terms of the stuff, like whether it's pre or post snap, kind of trying to get in his head, trying to get at him, he's very level-headed. And I think that elusive nature as well means that if you try to get physical and you fail, it can lead to that's where he thrives, is kind of in those chunk plays that are created as a result of that.
Taking advantage of over-aggressive defense, essentially.
Yeah, I would say so. I think that, and as I mentioned, like the kind of teams trusting their best corner to match him, and it's not worked throughout the season, despite playing against a couple of really nice players. So Yeah, I think it'll be a mix of things. That they will try to get physical with him, and I think at times that'll work. You just need to be careful with it as well.
Okay. All right. Now, moving on to the next phase of the game, really the last phase of the game is the special teams. I think both teams have pretty special return guys. Rashid Shaheed, obviously showed his impact immediately last game. And Marcus Jones has had a couple big returns, including some touchdowns on special teams this year. And is being talked about by a lot of people as potentially in the conversation for best punt returner of all time. There's a lot of here between, that's decided on field position, especially between two good teams, two good defenses. Sometimes you become a battle of field position. You don't want forced returns. You don't want these guys feeling like they have to grab it and run it. Fair catches are fine. I think that a lot of the secret in this, though, it comes down to the punters and the kickers. How well they perform. Now, I don't know a lot about you guys as punter and kicker, to be honest with you. I know our kicker, Andy Borgalis, rookie out of Miami. After game one, I was ready to run him out of town myself when he missed 2 extra points and like a 20-yard field goal. But he hasn't missed much since. He did miss that long shot in Denver last week, but I'm not really that mad at him for it. It was like a 63-yard attempt or something like that. It is what it is. You're not going to hit those most of the time, even, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, when I was growing up, a 63-yarder was like the record, and you wouldn't even thought about it. Now people are trying 55, 60-yarders all the time. I think our punter was really the only reason that Denver even got in threatening scoring range at one point in time last week, because he had a punt that netted something like 28 yards. It was just awful. Obviously, we're not going to have the weather conditions in San Francisco, as we already talked about with like the Drake May stuff earlier. But still, how do you feel the special teams stack up? How confident are you and your kicker if this comes down to a 55-yard field goal late in the fourth quarter? Do you feel like your putter is going to put you in advantageous situations in terms of field position? Give me the lowdown on the special teams out there.
So yeah, I think the strength over recent years for the Seahawks in the special teams unit has been punter Michael Dixon. He's been kind of up there. Every year he seems to be one that the fans are always like, he's a Pro Bowl snub. But he's been kind of up there in the top kind of echelons of the punters in the league for a good few years now. And it's just reliable. There are very, very few failures that I can think of in terms of a blocked punt, in terms of he's kind of muffed this miskicked this one. It's all been pretty accurate. He's good at pinning teams deep in their own territory. I think it'll be interesting, the coverage unit. It was really pretty poor last season. The whole special teams unit was just a disaster last year. And this year, the Seahawks have been really pretty good at keeping their opponents, whether it's kickoff coverage or punt coverage, been really good at keeping their opponents starting deep in their own territory. They'll be helped. They've brought back a key special teamer, Chaz Surratt, who's a linebacker, a really good special teams guy for the Seahawks. So he's going to be back fit for the Super Bowl. That should help them. They've had a weird kind of wrinkle this season where they've been using Mike Morris, defensive lineman, who's actually been playing really nicely on kick coverage duties, which is odd. You don't often, I feel like you don't see that very often. But
right.
I think I can't credit Jay Harbaugh enough for the work he's done with the Seahawks special teams this season. It's night and day from last year. So even before the Rashid Shaheed trade, Torrey Horton had a punt return touchdown against the Steelers, I want to say. And also the Seahawks were just, whether it was Derek Young, George Holani, a whole bunch of guys on kickoff return duty across the season, and they've kind of set the Seahawks up in good field position with pretty good regularity. In terms of the kicker, Jason Myers has had a really good year really, really impressive. He missed that kind of long game winner attempt against the Rams early in the season, but since then it's really been pretty solid for the most part. He's had up and down tenure in Seattle. He's had some really big missed field goals kind of late on in games, but he's also had plenty that he's made as well. So I'm not concerned. I worry a little bit perhaps about the kind of the strength of his leg these days in terms of these 50-plus yard field goal attempts. It still feels like that's a really long field goal attempt for him as soon as it's over 50 yards, whereas you've got other guys who kind of make it look a bit routine. So that's one thing that perhaps the Seahawks maybe need to, in the 2-minute drill type thing, need to maybe get an extra 5 or 10 yards as opposed to some other teams to feel comfortable about that field goal. So that could be something that's a factor perhaps. But in terms of the reliability, I think the Seahawks special teams have been a strength this year, which it hasn't been in previous years.
Okay. All right. Let's get towards the overall big picture and all that. Let's each one X factor. My X factor matchup, if you will, is going to be that Milton Williams on Anthony Bradford matchup. Bradford has been the weak spot on that line. The interior of the offensive line has been overall not great. They've got Gray Zabel, as you mentioned, Jalen Sundell, who is his college teammate. I honestly think that might be the only reason Sundell is playing in that spot right now. I think it might be about communication and comfort with the left guard, who's playing better since Sundell came back from injury. And you got to have one of those spots playing well if it's going to be the left guard you spent the 18th overall pick on. Sweet, because he's a good player. I loved Zabel last. I think everybody did. He was a draft darling or whatever.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's my X factor matchup. What do you think?
So I'll go on the other side of the ball, and I think a key. It won't necessarily be on a kind of snap to snap basis, but I think that if Will Campbell can manage to avoid any disasters against DeMarcus Lawrence. Lawrence has been actually not as great for the Seahawks on a snap-to-snap basis recently. It's been that he will make one or two big game-changing plays. If Campbell can manage to avoid that when he's lined up against them, I think that'll be key. Whether he's a strip sack merchant, so I think that's one that potentially could be a problem if Campbell gets beaten off the snap and Dre gets kind of some immediate pressure on that back throwing arm, then that could be a potential problem for the Patriots. Yeah. But I think that's a key matchup. If he can manage to kind of keep effectively a clean sheet against DeMarcus Lawrence and avoid any disasters there, that'll go a long way towards kind of preventing the big plays, the big whether it's as I say a turnover or a big sack in an important moment that, as we mentioned before, might prove to be a big factor in this game.
Okay. Now we'll get into the specifics of it. We are going to hold ourselves to this because we're going to be back here next week, you and I. We'll figure out what day works best. I'm thinking closer, but we'll talk, Monday, Tuesday or whatever works for you. My schedule is relatively flexible right now. But I'd like to get back together as soon as we can after the game and kind of go over things. So we're going to hold ourselves to these predictions here. But let's give a winner, let's give a score, and then I want an MVP favorite and then a dark horse MVP, a guy that people aren't going to see coming. And I guess I'll jump in first and say I've got Patriots. I think 24-20, something like that. I think relatively low scoring, grind it out. I think MVP, I'd just say Drake May because usually the quarterback. And I think the kid's going to have a good game. I think he's come off 3 bad games. I think that he needs to have a good game. I think he's just due for a good game. I think he feels good. I think he's ready. And I just feel like this is going to be a good game for Drake May. So that's my MVP favorite, game MVP favorite. My dark horse candidate is Marcus Jones. Marcus Jones is one of those guys that he can make you pay for a mistake, and he can make you pay for a mistake with 6 points. and he has multiple ways to score those 6 points, whether it be on special teams or on defense. And he's just the type of guy who he can change a game real fast. So that's my dark horse candidate for an MVP. Let's hear your predictions. Let's see what we think's going to happen this weekend.
So I've had to go for the Seahawks. I've got 27-22 as my prediction, and in terms of my pick for Super Bowl MVP, I think that Ken Walker will be have a big impact for Seattle. If Seattle's to win, I think that he's going to be kind of a guy who gets a lot of the attention as a result of it, because I think that he's hitting form, kind of playing the best football of his career at the moment. He's managed to cut out some of the negative plays that he had beforehand. So I think that Ken Walker would be my kind of favourite pick for MVP. And in terms of a dark horse, I'm going to go for someone on defense. I'm going to go for Ernest Jones. I think that he's all season long has been massively underrated. In terms of, he's never mentioned in kind of the top linebackers in the league, but he's got 5 interceptions this year, a couple of forced fumbles, and he's, certainly in the kind of situation I mentioned earlier. I imagine if there's a big 4th down stop, he's going to be right in the heart of that. I think that it wouldn't surprise me if he, if the Seahawks get a couple of those big plays on defense that we mentioned, that he's really, kind of he could be behind them. So dark horse, definitely a long shot, but that's who I'll go for as my dark horse Super Bowl MVP candidate.
I like it. I would almost like a linebacker winning Super Bowl MVP. I just hope it's not him and them in this Super Bowl. But anyway, look, this is going to be a great game no matter what. We'll definitely come back and talk about what happened Sunday night next week at some point in time. I want to thank you for your time. We went over a little bit. I said an hour. Here we are at about an hour and 15. Why don't you take a minute and plug your show, plug where people can come find your stuff, your analysis, your thoughts, all of that.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. Really appreciated getting the chance to join you, and apologies for talking too much and dragging it on for you. As I said before, I'm a Seahawks writer for Huddle UK, and I'm on the Mrs. Irrelevant Draft Professors podcast. So you can find everything I do on my X account. That's at Peter Quinn 1997.
Oh, we got a comment in the chat too. Mike predicts 17-10 Pats. Drake May MVP. Dark horse. He doesn't have a dark horse for us, but 17-10 with a Drake May MVP. So sure. We're going to see what happens this weekend. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about it next week. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Please remember to like and subscribe. Go find Peter on Twitter. Follow his stuff. And we will see you guys. I'll be back here tomorrow to talk a little bit more about this matchup. And like I said, Peter and I will be back next week. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for the listen. Don't forget to share, too. Do that. All right. We'll see you next time.